Welcome to this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story Podcast. I'm Trista Polo from iwokeupawesome.com, and I am your host. Each week we learn the story behind that vanity plate. You know, the one you saw driving down the road? What did it say? What did it mean? Why did they choose it? Welcome to this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story Podcast. I'm excited to have Denny Salvage from Eastern Connecticut with us. He is Raylene Taskoski's father, and his plate is DEN-56. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Trista.
I'm excited to have you. Now, Raylene was on a previous episode. Her license plate is Romance, and she said, you've got to talk to my dad. So tell me the story behind your license plate, DEN-56.
It all started when my wife and I were dating in a 57 Chevrolet that I shared with my mom. That was our family's second car in 1967. And Renee was driving a 55 Chevrolet that she shared with her mom and her dad as their family second car. So we were in a 55 and a 57. And one day when we decided to get married, neither parents thought it was a good idea at the time. So we just said, let's do it easy. And we got in my 57 Chevrolet that I drove from Yukon to Providence, Rhode Island to pick her up. Mm-hmm. We drove into one of the major airports in the New York area and flew to North Carolina and got married. So
wow.
We actually eloped in my 57 Chevrolet.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents ever come around?
Eventually.
It took
time.
Well, it's a good thing that you guys eloped, because it sounds like you had a wonderful life together, great kids, grandkids now. You're still married and happy.
And great grandkids now, 5 of them.
Wow, that's awesome. Oh my goodness. Now
Raylene helped.
Raylene helped. Now you have quite a history that goes well beyond even just the beginning with these 56, 57 Chevys. Tell us a little bit about how they've played a role in your life.
Well, at the time, I really wasn't a mechanic. I knew some really basic stuff, but I was into animals. I wanted to be a veterinary. So I was studying a lot of medical stuff and not automobile stuff. But I was driving a car because I could buy them very reasonably at the time. There were like 5 million 55, 56, and 57 Chevys around. So they were inexpensive. And I learned how to fix my own car by necessity. So when I couldn't fix the 57 Chevy anymore because it needed welding and stuff to save it, I found a 56 Chevy very reasonably, and I could use parts from the 57 Chevy on the 56. So that started, hey, this makes sense. I can buy these cars pretty cheap and I can fix them myself. So that makes sense. We don't have to have a new car with new car payments. So we went with what she was driving and I was driving and combined to driving a 56 because we liked the sitting in that one the best. And then I started just buying 56 Chevys because I could get them pretty cheaply.
Okay.
And all the hot rodders, all the kids, they wanted the 5s and 7s because they were the hot ones. So I had my choice. I could buy plenty of 56s, and we decided we were going to save a few because I knew they were going to be sought after eventually. And that led us to buying an old farm that had been a chicken farm with big buildings on it. And we could start saving 56 Chevys as I maintained them with my own parts. So some of the cars became very valuable for restoration projects eventually.
Wow. So it's like instead of being a veterinarian and getting into animal rescue, you got into Chevy rescue.
56 and 7 Chevy rescue. Anyway, but at one point I had so many 56 Chevys that friends started calling me jokingly, hey, that's DEN-56. This guy's got 57s. Meet Jim 57. And that's how my friendship started to develop. And eventually, by 1979, all through the end of the 60s and through the 70s, we were driving these every day. We've been in Canada in 56 Chevys, in Michigan in 56 Chevys, and they were just old cars that I was maintaining, and we were using them for daily transportation. And we started a classic Chevy club here in Eastern Connecticut with friends that I knew that had become friends of mine that had the Tri-5s. Today is still an active chapter of a classic car club called the Dream Machine Classics of Eastern Connecticut. I was the first president. Renee was the secretary.
Wow. How did you know that these were such special cars? They were probably just, like you said, they were so common in their time, but there was something about them that you knew they were something worth saving, salvaging, restoring, and collecting. How did you know that?
I really can't say how I knew, but when I was living at home, living with my dad, and he and my uncles and grandfather had classics, I would hear my dad say sometimes, boy, I wish I never sold that car. Look what it's worth today. I'm thinking, it happened in my dad's generation. It's going to happen in mine. It's just going to repeat. And what are the cars all the kids want that were my age? They wanted the 5s and 7s. And in the 56 was always called the redheaded stepchild. It was right between the two. But still, people love their redheaded stepchildren.
Sure.
So I knew it was going to happen again because there was so many people had them, and they were using them for drag racing because of the suspensions that Chevrolet developed in 55. And it was the first mass-produced small block V8 for Chevrolet since 1917. So it had high revs. It had a lot of features that made it good for performance. So they were drag racing, they were circle racing. And I said, it's not going to stop. It's going to keep going as long as those cars are out there. And they're still so popular that there's a company in Texas that has a source for parts in Taiwan that are making brand new bodies for Tri-5 Chevrolets. You can buy a brand new body and build it any way you want. It's not just the Tri-5s now, but it's moved to other, other interest cars. But it started with the Tri-5s. And I was DEN-56, so I applied for a Connecticut license plate with my name, and nobody had it. So I got DEN-56.
That's awesome. And so that's been your license plate for quite a while, right?
Yes, since sometime in the early 80s, I got that plate. In fact, it was 1985, I think. I bought a stock car to race at my local circle track because I had always wanted to drive a race car, but I was never reckless on the street, so I didn't do any, performance driving on the street. So I bought a race car, and everybody gets assigned a number. So I requested number 56, and nobody had it. So I wound up towing my 66 Chevelle race car to my local track with my 56 Chevrolet that had the license plate DEN-56.
Wow.
And even though I hadn't won a race at all, I made the Speedway Scene magazine because here I was towing 56 with a 56 Chevy, a 66 Chevelle number 56, and people thought it was cool. So
That's awesome.
it just kind of it continued to roll like a snowball. And it even gets better than that because Raylene got involved once again. At one point, she was at our local community college, and she met with some of her classmates to study, and it went really well. So they all decided to exchange phone numbers so they could keep in touch. And Raylene's one of her friends handed her phone number, and she said, "Oh, my dad would kill for that number." And her friend said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, because he owns a whole collection of 56 Chevys, and he's known as 56. So she said, "Well, if my mother ever moves, I'll call you and tell you so your dad can have her number." Well, a couple of years later, she called Raylene and she said, "Tell your dad my mom's moving. He can have her number." And
Wow.
it had 56 in it twice.
Wow. So now your phone number, your license plate, your cars are all about 56. That's awesome. Talk about a
That was
life's
before.
theme.
Yeah, that was before the internet.
That's great. You have quite the following on your YouTube channel, I'm pretty sure. Is that right?
Well, the YouTube channel, which is about antique cars and trucks, happened because I used to love going to salvage yards to find parts that I didn't already have. I actually had a subscription to a magazine that had an article every month in the back that was called Salvage Yard Roundup, where the editor would send, one of his cameramen out and said, "Find a salvage yard, take a bunch of pictures, and we'll do a story." And every month when I got the magazine, I would say, "Here's that article." I'd go right to it, Salvage Roundup, and I'd read about the cars. And I'd say, "Yeah, I know where there's one of those." And one day I was sitting down to watch the NASCAR, and I picked up the magazine, and it just kind of hit me that what is it about this article every month that just sucks me in? And I heard a voice that said, "I'm giving you a TV show."
Mm.
So I was involved in that on my local access, and I said, "This is amazing. No wonder I get sucked into this, because it's doing what I love to do. I love
Yeah.
to produce show." So I contacted the editor. In fact, I don't remember the NASCAR race that day. When I got off the couch, I came in here into the computer room. I sat down with the magazine. I found the editor's email address, and I said, "This is the idea I have. I would like to take your article, Salvage Yard Roundup, that you have every month, and create it as a video for a television show. And here's the plot development I have." And I hit send. And then I said, "That might have been a mistake. I don't know this guy.
Yeah, who
He could
knows?
say, yeah, who knows? This is my idea, but oh well." I sent it. It's Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and at 8:30 on Monday morning in May, 15 years ago, I still have the email. He said, "Denny, great idea. You and I have the same 10W30 in our blood. I will help you as much as I can." And he did. He invited me and Renee to his office in Florida. We brought down some copies of my pilot so he could look at it. He made very constructive criticisms and how to make it better. And then he said, "Now make sure you copyright this, because I'm in the industry and somebody will steal this."
Wow.
So I did.
What a stand-up guy, because he could have easily stolen it, like you said, especially since you got it from his idea. He probably could even have
Right.
justified it as a businessman,
Yeah, his name was Greg Rager. So then I did the paperwork. I got the plot development copyrighted, and I took his ideas. I created a better quality pilot, and I started shopping it around in film festivals, local film festivals, because I met a bunch of people in southern New England who had put together an association of people in film and audio and stage, and we all got together and we were helping each other produce stuff locally. And every time I had a piece to show, they'd view it and they'd give me criticism, and we became like a big family.
Wow.
And the president of the group, his name is Alec, he even came to my friend's house one day on his own time to help us finish editing the pilot so we could show it at a film festival. And people enjoyed it. And that was a few years ago, but Raylene stepped in the picture again, and she has a YouTube channel for her Pure Romance by Raylene, and she put my trailers on her Pure Romance channel because she knows that every wife has a husband, every daughter has a father,
Yep.
and there's going to be a lot of them who have antique and classic cars, and it started getting quite a few views from her channel. And she said,
Wow.
"Dad, you got 125,000 views on my channel." Yeah, she said, you gotta get your own channel. So she helped me with a couple of friends who were in the industry, and we created my own channel called Bring 'Em Back to Life. And right now we have 12,300 subscribers and climbing.
That's awesome. And you put out episodes how often?
Well, we were trying to do one every 2 weeks, but then the coronavirus epidemic started. And I've had to shelter in place a lot. And my grandson, who has a degree in film and editing, and he's working in the industry, lives in Rhode Island, and he does all my editing. So we haven't gotten very many out since the corona issue started, the pandemic. We're at episode 46, so there's plenty there for people to look at, even if they're just finding the channel.
That's amazing. How many, because I know you said you have the chicken farm and you've always had a collection. How many do you have now, and how many did you have at once? What was your record?
At one time, we had over 30 just 1956s.
Okay.
But some of them are front halves, some of them were back halves. Some of them were right sides, some of them were left sides. So yeah, we had 30.
That's
now we're
awesome.
Somewhere around 20 because I have decided to start selling some. I saved them. That was my goal, to keep them from going to the salvage yards and be put in the crushers.
Yeah.
And I saved some that I didn't intend to restore, but would have if things were different. But now I'm saying, well, if the guy's 50 years old or he's 55 and retiring and he wants a 56 convertible and I have 4, I probably should sell him one.
Yeah.
so another one can get restored. So that's what I've been doing since I was 65. Actually, when I was 63, I got bladder cancer and I had to get through that.
Yeah.
So once I got through that, and I said, okay, I live, but I'm not going to live long enough to restore all these cars I have left in the barn. I'm going to start selling some of the choice ones that I know I can get a good price for, and then let other people restore them, and just keep 6 or 7 that I consider my close-knit circle.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. The inner circle family. Absolutely.
Yeah, the inner circle ones. But at one time when I was looking at the insurance policies, I said, there were 9 assembly plants in the United States building classic Chevrolets in the 3 years. So I had 7 of them represented in my collection. So
wow.
Only two I didn't have representatives from in my collection. And one was from Kansas City, Kansas, and one was from up in Wisconsin, Janesville, Wisconsin. So I started looking on eBay for people selling 56 Chevys, and I didn't care if they were 4-door sedans. I didn't care if they had an engine, but if they were selling them and they had a VIN that said Janesville or a VIN that said Kansas City, I'd put a bid in on them. And I got the last 2 I needed just to finish the collection.
Wow.
One of them ran and drove, and I hired a professional transporter to bring it from Kansas City. And the other was in Janesville, Wisconsin. I didn't have an engine, so I made a road trip with a friend, and we went to Wisconsin and got it.
That's fun. What an adventure. I just love your passion and your knowledge for the 5, 6, and 7 Chevys. That's awesome. I want to just tell you, your YouTube channel is awesome. Like, if people are interested in this kind of content, so typically you go to salvage yards and you're touring salvage yards, and they can watch you do that and see what you find. Is that typically what you're covering in your episodes?
Yes, I show people the salvage yards that are sometimes 3rd or 4th generation owned.
Wow.
So I'll have somebody who's my age that was born on the property and raised on the property and still runs the business that he got from his father. And I'll meet his son and grandson who are working the business with him.
Okay.
Or I'll find a 3rd or 4th generation grandson who has taken it over from grandpa and dad and are running it. But they're still selling parts off antique and classic vehicles, or they'll sell what's left of one so someone can restore it and bring it back to life.
Yeah. That's
because right
great.
now there are there are many, many classic vehicles, not just the Tri-5 Chevys, that people want, and a lot of companies are remanufacturing the replacement parts. So if you have a basic body with a VIN, and in some cases you need a title, in some cases you don't, but if you have the basic vehicle, you can buy the doors and the fenders and the trunks for vehicles that have considerable value or interest. So I show what's out there. If they, if they have it and they're willing to sell it, I say, here's where they are. If you find something on my video that I showed on camera here, call them.
Yeah.
Make an offer or make a deal, rent a trailer, and take a vacation.
That's awesome. So you're offering a service. You're showing a piece of Americana. You're almost doing a reality TV show. And I just want to give some stats of your YouTube channel because I'm very impressed. I have a YouTube channel. I know what it is to try and get subscribers and followers. And clearly your content is very sought after because you have over 124,000 subscribers. And in just August, you're about 1,000 views a day of your videos. And you have total lifetime views of 2.53 million views on just your channel. And that doesn't even count the views that you got on Raylene's channel before you started your own channel. So with only a handful, just 40 or so episodes, you have such a following and people are so appreciative and really taking advantage of getting the content that you're creating. So I really want to acknowledge you for that. Now, I have to ask you, obviously this is a passion of yours. Is this also your main source of income, or have you had professions or jobs in your lifetime?
Well, I did have a profession, but unfortunately, political activities in Congress put my company out of business.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I worked for a great, reputable local company in Eastern Connecticut that made the nuclear reactors for Navy submarines.
Wow.
And I worked in the reactor assembly area. So I was a technician at some points working with the engineers. I was an assembler inspector that I could inspect after the job was done to make sure it was done properly and it's met all the specs of the Department of Defense. So yes, I know how nuclear reactors go together. So I had to find a new career and I went into television. I wound up getting a degree in communications and doing Christian show and tell.
Yes.
And just before the COVID hit, I was starting to get a Google AdSense check every month that was sizable enough to have people like Raylene said, "All right, Dad."
Yeah, that's awesome.
But that went away.
It'll be back. So this COVID thing is a blip, and it'll be back. I'm so appreciative of you being on and sharing your plate story and your passion for a very important piece of American history. I do like to turn the tables before we wrap up and ask you if you have one question you'd like to ask me. What would you like to ask me, if anything?
Well, having communicated with you on several occasions now, trying to get this interview done, and having been with you here on my phone, I realize you're very skilled at what you do, and I was wondering how you got involved in radio and how did you develop your radio personality so that you can be such a good interviewer?
Oh, that's a nice question because it's got a compliment built right in. Thank you for that. Well, I went to school in New Paltz, SUNY New Paltz. I have a communication degree. And I joke that I use it every day. I'm talking every single day. So I use my degree every day, unlike so many people. But I did a lot of radio when I was in college. And I didn't pursue it professionally. I have had more than one podcast in my life. This is actually my third podcast. But I was a co-host in the other two. And I always ended up acting like the interviewer, even though I was the co-host. And so when I decided to do a new podcast, I said, I'm going to do it as an interviewer because that's the piece I really enjoy. And I think part of it comes from my innate curiosity of others and I am highly trained in communication and listening skills, and I think that really helps me as well. But I love learning about people, and so I'm hoping that by getting to meet really cool people like you, we get to know who people are and, your license plate's DEN-56, and look at the juicy, rich history that's behind that. And that's something I'm very privileged to be able to share.
Well, and I'm glad that Raylene shared it with you.
Yes.
Because, she has a unique experience herself.
Yes. Yes, she does. She was a very fun interview, and I loved finding out. I mean, her plate's cool. Romance, right? Who wouldn't want to know the story behind that? And it was really wonderful to hear the great work she's been doing. And I'm just so happy to have had you on as well. Any last words before we wrap up?
Well, I think what gives me gratification is when I meet someone and they tell me that they've seen an episode of my show and it helped them finish a project, find a project, or buy a project that they had been looking for.
That's awesome.
That's the gratification.
Well, I'm going to include the link to your YouTube channel right on the show notes. And I want to just thank you so much for sharing your plate story with us, and I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Denny Salvage, for being with us today.
And that was kind of a neat combination of what my friends and mother called me and where I shoot my shows. I just had to add the L in Savage.
Yes, indeed. I love it. I love it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story Podcast. Please subscribe to Trista's Plate Story Podcast to get the story behind all those vanity plates driving with you on the road. And if you would like to nominate the owner of a license plate, including you, or visit any of our partners and sponsors, come and see us at PL8STORY.com. That's PL8STORY.com, and give us the details. If you enjoyed this episode, please drop a review and give us a share. I'm Trista Polo, wishing you well on the road to your next adventure.